Well, so I've told you now 3 times, unless you're just joining us online, that Carter, my oldest son, as well as some others, left for college today. My emotions are all over the place. So since he's gone, I'm going to now use him as a sermon illustration. Ready? Yes, excellent. All right. Many of you know Carter is not my biological son. I became his dad when he was 2 years old. I can remember a time came to my mind just yesterday when he was 4 years old, and we were out camping. Have you ever been there with one of your children on a hike, and your child is whining again and again about how long the hike is? That was Carter. The hike was only about a mile, and it was completely flat. And over again, he's telling me, "Dad, I can't do it. Dad, I can't do it." And over again, I told him, "Carter, you were made. You were made to walk like this. Your legs were made to run and to climb up hills. And if you do this now, if you finish this thing, when you get older, you're going to be hiking all over the place. You're going to love it. You're going to be so strong." And then I remember this picture here. Later when Carter left, this is Carter and Zach heading off to a snow camp. We got that one with the backpacks up there? We'll get it in a minute. And then this last, there's the backpack picture. He became an amazing hiker as he grew up. Look at that backpack. And then this year, he kept bugging me to go rucking with him. Do you know what rucking is? That's where you load up a backpack like that with a whole bunch of stuff, put a whole bunch of weight in it, and go walk around the woods just for fun. Just for fun, you do that. So from whining and complaining to bugging me to go rucking with him all the time. I remember as he was growing up, we noticed in him the ability to fix things. I love working on cars, and I learned that all from books. When Carter was about 5 years old, maybe 6, I did my first car repair with him. I wish I had a picture of that. I can't find it. Engine half taken apart, timing belt we did together. And there were certain parts where just putting something in quite just the right place, he would go, "Oh, Dad, I think it has to be like this." And I go, "Well, how did you know that?" And we watched later as he grew and he was able to help more and more with those kind of things. He became a responsible young man. I have a picture of him helping out on the tech team here. Round of applause for our tech team, which we don't do often enough. That ability grew in him and will continue to grow, to fix things, to put things in the right place, to take responsibility for things. And then I remember watching this thing grow in him, this thing where he always wanted to do stuff that had to do with the military. That was never something that was in me. I was not a big military guy in any way. And so I had to learn how to encourage that and get into it. And then I watched as it took a Scottish turn. It took this turn towards Scotland, and he started playing these crazy pipes. They have a bag attached to them, and he would play them in our garage every single day. They would fill the house with noise, and let me tell you that the noise was not so pleasant for the first year. But then watching him, and let's put the bagpipe picture up there, be able to actually play them. And watching last week at the beach as he played them after the service, and just people standing around him watching, filled with joy as he was playing those pipes, and Graham was drumming alongside of him. We watch them as they grow up. We watch the things, we train our children. We also watch the things that God has naturally put in them, and we raise those up into what they were made to be. That's the job of parenting. This morning, we're continuing our sermon series, Wisdom for Living. And in this series, what we're doing is we're looking at the Bible. We're looking at the Bible for what is the way that things were made, the way that life was made to go. What is wisdom? What are the instructions of God that if I follow them, my life's not going to go perfect, but it's going to be like going down river instead of trying to go up river, right? If I'm trying to go upriver, life is very hard. I'm going against the current. If I'm going downriver, is life going to be perfect? No. There's still going to be rapids and obstacles that I have to avoid, but I'm going to be going with the flow, with the way that God has made the universe. So in this series of messages, and we'll do this one, and then in 2 weeks we'll finish it up on September the 8th, we're looking at what does the Bible say about different areas of life. What is wisdom? How has he created the world with respect to these different areas of life? And today, we're looking at parents and children. Now, a lot of the message today will be directed at parents and how to raise children. If you are not a parent, do not tune out. Because this applies to every relationship as well as it does to parenting. And every single one of you has parents. Even if you don't know them, even if they have passed away, you have parents. And we're going to be looking, in the beginning of this message, we'll be looking at that relationship between parents and children and just how important it is. Always. Not only while you are at home, not only while you're a child. So the wisdom that I'm going to be directing most of my comments toward parents. If you are not a parent, maybe you'll be a parent someday. If you are past that stage, it's just not going to happen. Please redirect those. All of these things will apply to different areas of your life, the relationships that you have. Ask the Holy Spirit and he'll lead you. All right, so we're going to do this in 3 sections. First, we're going to talk about the importance of the parent-child relationship and the importance of parenting. Next, we're going to talk about a key verse of Scripture that not only applies to parenting, but all of life. We're going to talk about golden rule parenting. And finally, we're going to talk about the big word, discipline. What that actually means. Let me say that if you're a parent here and you are thinking, oh, I'm going to get some great tips out of this message, you are going to get some great tips out of this message. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. There are a lot of scriptures that we're going to go over today. This will be an overview. We teach parenting classes here at Community of Hope regularly. If you are a parent actively raising children of any age, you must take one of those classes. You must do the things that you need to do to grow in your parenting. All right, let's start out and take a look at the importance of parenting. We're going to begin with the importance of parenting. We'll begin right where we should begin in the 10 Commandments. Okay, so Exodus chapter 20. This will be on the screen. There will be a few verses that are not on the screen today. And if you got a phone and you want to look those verses up, you can do that. Actually, I'm gonna start one place before Exodus 20. I told you I have a lot of verses today. This is one I didn't plan to use, but I'm going to use it. We're going to go to Psalm 127. And this will not be on the screen, so you're going to have to listen. Psalm 127 is a very short psalm. The Psalms were worship songs that were written for the people of Israel a long time ago. So this is something that they would sing and they would memorize. And it really has 2 pieces. And you're going to see those 2 pieces are kind of amazing. They're amazingly relevant to our world today. The first piece goes like this. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. So unless God is doing the work that you're engaged in, your work is useless. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. So the first half of this psalm is all about people committed to their work way too much, workaholics. They're trying to fix the world, not God's way, but with their own strength. Then look at where he goes in the second half of the psalm. The very next verse is this. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring are a reward from him. And I'm going to focus on that. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponent in the court or at the gate. Now, here we see these 2 pieces are actually connected, and it is very relevant to our world today. Many people in our world today, there are less and less children being born. Less and less people are willing to pay the price that it takes to raise children. And they are more and more committing, our culture more and more committing to careers, working really, really hard to get the things that I want in life. And here, Psalm 127, written thousands of years ago, addresses the very same thing. Working really, really hard. We do need to work hard in life, but at the things God has asked us to do. If we're working in our own strength, staying up later and later, toiling to no end, it's useless if God is not at work in us. And the second half of the psalm is pointing to what is His way. His way is to lay down our lives for other people, not to do all the work on our own. And one of the big ways that we as a society, as a race, do that is by raising children, by being willing to have children, to adopt children, to help other people's children, so that those children can be raised up into who they were made to be. And that is the way to transform the world. You see the vision in this psalm. All right, now let's jump to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12. This one will be on the screen. And we'll talk for a minute about the deep importance of the parent-child relationship. Just how important is your relationship with your children? Just how important is your relationship with your parents? Let's see. Exodus chapter 20, God brought these millions of people out into the desert from the land of Egypt, and then He came down on a mountain in fire and smoke. He scared them half to death so that they would pay attention to what He was going to say. And then He wrote it. He burned what He was going to say into stone tablets so that it couldn't be erased or washed away. And all that preparation, and He said 10 things to them. And here is number 5. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Right at the core of the instruction manual, essential teaching for what it means to be human, right at the core is that you must honor your father and your mother. That relationship is essential. Let's look at one more scripture that'll show us just how important that relationship is. Let's turn to Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. This comes right at the end of the Old Testament, the part of the Bible that was written before Jesus came. And it is part of a prophecy. So hundreds of years before Jesus came and before John the Baptist came, Malachi was a prophet, and he was told by God what would happen. And here he's talking about John the Baptist, who was going to come and prepare people for Jesus' arrival. And here's what it says in verses 5 and 6. See, I will send the prophet Elijah. It's weird that he's calling John the Baptist Elijah, but that's what he's doing. To you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. And what's He going to do? He's going to prepare the world for Jesus. And what does that look like? Here's what it looks like. He will turn the hearts of parents to their children, and the hearts of children to their parents. Or else, if He does not, if they don't turn, I will come and strike the land with total destruction. How important in God's sight is the relationship between parents and children? We're not going to take the time today to try and spell out why it's so important to God. It's so important because it is essential to every other relationship and to the future history of the world. It's so important because it impacts so strongly human souls and whether or not they turn to God. But it's enough for us today to look at this and recognize that God, who knows everything, who sees the world as it really is, when He looks down and He looks at what is the most important, what is extremely important for these human beings to do, it's not have a great career and work so hard so you can earn a lot of money and have a nice retirement. One of the most important things to Him is this: what is the relationship between the parents and the children? What does it look like? If it isn't close enough, if even John the Baptist and Jesus can't turn that relationship, the hearts of parents and children, back toward each other, If that can't happen, he's going to have to come and strike the land with total destruction to cleanse it from all the evil that has been embedded in it. That's pretty intense. So we should wake up and pay attention as we begin to talk about, okay, how do we raise children, and what is the relationship between parents and children? What should it look like? How can we work on that? We need to pay attention here. If you, as an adult or a teenager sitting in this room listening or watching online, if you have a broken relationship with your parents, it is absolutely essential for your life and for the world that you go and do everything you can with the power of God to fix it. Even if your parents are no longer alive, it is essential. Even if your parents want nothing to do with you, even if you don't know who they are, it is essential that you fix that relationship as much as you can deep in your heart. It will change everything. All right. So let's move on from there, where we look in there at how important is the relationship between parents and children. So we can infer from there the relationship between parents and children is that important, then how we raise our children is also extremely important. It is not something to be taken lightly. And so the first point that you can write down in your notes is this: believe. If you want to raise solid children, you want to raise children who become, as much as possible, the people they were meant to be. True followers of Jesus, full of love and life. Step number one, believe. You must strongly believe your role as a parent is crucial. I do not use that word by accident. The root word of crucial is crux, is the cross. It is the center, in many ways, of what you are doing in your life if you are a parent raising children. You must believe that it is extremely important. You are, if you are a parent, you are the greatest influence on your children. The greatest influence. It's not the culture. It's not their friends. All those things will influence them, but you are, by far, the greatest influence on your children. Your example, the way that you relate to them, what you teach them. Next, second note. Second thing to fill in the blanks there. We're coming quick now. Because it's so important, you must, as a parent, put in the effort. You must put in the effort. And I'm going to say what that looks like. Learn, plan, work, pray. Those are 4 categories of effort that you must put in as a parent. You must learn. You must do everything you can. That may look like classes. It may look like mentoring from someone else who is a parent and has gone ahead of you and done it well. It may look like direct knowledge from God, asking Him to guide you in particular situations in your life. You must learn how to do this well. You must make a plan for how you're going to do it. Do not just wander through parenting and let it happen to you. I know life comes at us fast, and it's hard not to do that. But we must continually, wherever you're at, make a plan. Figure out what needs to be done as best you can, and then make a plan for how you're going to do it, and then work. Do it. Put in the effort that is necessary. And a big part of that work, of course, is prayer. Prayer changes the world by God's power, because God answers prayer, because He loves us. And so we must be praying for our children constantly. This will, maybe even as much or more than all of the things we do or don't do, the things we do wrong, this will affect who they become as God's power is released through those prayers. Learn, plan, work, and pray. So the importance of children, the importance of parenting, holding that very strongly is a very strong value. Remember, if you're not a parent and will not be a parent in the future, you can still apply this to your life in so many ways. Do you see it? It's just as valid to the relationships that you have in your life, to the people that God has placed, maybe for you to parent as you bring them into relationship with other people and with God. As God uses you to draw the people in your circle of influence toward Him. All these same principles apply in a little bit different way. All right, let's look then at what I'm going to suggest today is the core. It's a core biblical teaching, and it's essential for parenting and how we view our role as parents. And this section I'm going to call Golden Rule Parenting, and we're going to look at the Golden Rule. So let's read that. Hopefully you know what the Golden Rule is. This is one of the most famous teachings of the greatest teacher who ever lived. His name is Jesus. We call him the Lord and the Son of God for a good reason. And this comes in the book of Matthew, chapter 7 and verse 12. In one line, Jesus surpasses all the teaching of all of history that came before him. In one line, he delivers a teaching that changes human life and the course of the world. So, in everything, he said, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Do to other people, no matter what they've done to you, no matter if they're your enemy, no matter if everything in you wants to take revenge on them, you're going to do to them what you would want them to do to you if you were in their place. This, he says, sums up the law and the prophets. That is the entire Old Testament of the Bible. It sums it all up. If you were to live this out perfectly, you would be living out all of the commandments that you are supposed to live out from the Old Testament. This is an amazing teaching. Let's dig into it a little bit. And what I want to say this morning about it is that it dramatically recognizes, it deeply acknowledges that other people are real. That might sound like a strange way to phrase it. It acknowledges that other people are actually people, just like me. You see, what happens in life, many of us go through life thinking most of the time about, well, ourselves. And that's natural, isn't it? Jesus never said, don't think about yourself at all. That would be impossible. You think about yourself just naturally. When you wake up in the morning, you are yourself. And so you think, well, okay, I need to get up and I need to take care of myself. And I need to make sure that I be responsible in my life, make sure that I have what I need. I need to go to work. I need to earn money. I need to make sure that I'm doing things right. And so all of our thinking naturally tends to be about ourselves. The problem with that is that if we don't correct it, we tend to only think of ourselves as real people. I only think of myself as someone who's got these deep emotions, these deep needs. I only think of myself as someone who's got these incredible gifts. And I think of other people. The natural tendency for human beings in this world is to think of other people just as a means to an end. I only think of this other person as much as they impact me. And with our children, that is often a pattern that parents fall into. Now, we know that that child is a person, has a soul just like me. But when they're little, that soul, it's not as visible, it's not as expressed, is it? When they're little, mostly what they are is someone who cries, this little being who cries and poops and needs to eat. Right? And so I spend all of my time taking care of those physical needs. And the child can become almost like a task. As they get older, if we are in that habit, we can simply persist in that, thinking of the child only as an extension of myself, not paying attention to who God made them to be, separate from me and different from me. They are connected to us, our children. They are like us in some ways, but they are not the same person as us. This is essential to recognize, and the Golden Rule recognizes it so deeply. I need to think about if I were that person. This is a deep way of imagining that they are a human being, a soul, just like me. If I were that person, what would I need from my father, from my mother, from those around me? and then do what they need. I'm going to read for you a quote from C.S. Lewis. If you don't know who that is, I'm not going to tell you, but he's a great author, so read some of his books. Here's a quote from a book called The Four Loves, and he's talking here about parents and children. He says this, this was written in 1958. It's going to sound to you like it was written today. We hear a great deal about the rudeness of this rising generation. So he said we hear a great deal about the rudeness of these young whippersnappers, these millennials, and these, what are teenagers called now? I don't know. What generation are they? What are they? Gen Z. Wow, what are we going to do next? We hear a great deal about the rudeness of these young whippersnappers who do nothing but play Fortnite and do all kinds of things on the internet that we don't know about. I am an oldster myself, Lewis says, and I might be expected to take the oldster's side. But in fact, I have been far more impressed by the bad manners of parents to children than by those of children to parents. Who has not been the embarrassed guest at family meals where the father or mother treated their grown-up offspring with an incivility, so a rudeness, which offered to any other young people would simply have terminated the acquaintance? Dogmatic assertions on matters which the children understand and the elders don't. So the elders say, it must be this way about things that they don't even know about. Ridicule of things the young people take seriously, sometimes of their religion. Insulting references to their friends all provide an easy answer to the question, why are they always out? Why do they like every house better than their own home? Well, who does not prefer civility to barbarism? And then he says, in a great summary of the golden rule, he says this, the root principle that will correct this, the root principle is this, that no one give any kind of preference to himself. The root principle is this, love other people as much as you love yourself. The root principle is this, do to other people, even your children, what you would want your parents to do for you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. All right, so we've talked about just how important the parent-child relationship and parenting is, and now we've talked about the core of what will guide you into the right kind, God's wisdom in parenting. Now let's talk about the big word, discipline. Oh man, everybody say discipline. That's the big scary word. How do we do it? What should we do? And the first thing I want to say is this, there are two sides to discipline. Discipline, as it's outlined in the Bible, and as the root of that word in English means, is not just about correcting someone, but in fact it is about training them in every way towards something. It's not just about correcting. It can't be separated from correction. Correction must be there, but so must building them up. Discipline is about both, building up and correcting. Let's look at our next verse. And in some ways, this is a key verse for the day. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. It says this, train up a child in the way that they should go. And even when they are old, they will not depart from it. Train up a child in the way that they should go. And even when they are old, they will not depart from it. This verse, number one, we can see that it is focused on the building up side of discipline. It is about discipline. It's about how you raise a child into the person that they were made to be. But it's not about the corrective side only. It's about the building up side. Second, this verse means it's very deep. In the original language that it was written in, the words here carry a depth that the English translation does not always carry. It means several things. It does mean show them the ways that all human beings should go, teach them what's wise, teach them to listen to their elders, teach them to be kind to people, teach them to be responsible. It means all of those things that every human being needs. But more than that, this verse, as has been recognized by many people who've studied it deeply now, this verse written thousands of years ago means train up a child in the particular way that that child was created to be. Listen to that and think about it for a minute, because it requires what we've already talked about. It requires the golden rule. It requires a whole different view of parenting than is natural for us. Train up the child to go in the way that that particular child was made to be. It's not just about teaching them a whole bunch of rules that everyone needs to follow, though that is necessary for children. It is about paying attention to what God has made that is sitting right in front of you. All your children are different. If you have more than one child, if you're in the room and you have more than one child, and you know that your children, all of them, are dramatically different, nod your head and say, mm-hmm. So it must be the case then. It must be that we have to do some things differently for each one of them. And that is going to require listening. It's going to require discernment, trying to figure out just what those things are. And it's going to require wisdom from God, because we are not competent. We are not qualified to do this on our own. It's going to require a lot from us. Building them up. Let me say here a few things about what building them up looks like, what the different components. So there are two pieces here to discipline. You can fill in this point in your notes. Discipline involves building them up and letting them feel natural consequences. Okay, that's in your notes then. Build them up and let them feel natural consequences. So there are two pieces to training a child. One is building them up. And this side must come first. The other side, which we'll talk about in a moment, letting them feel natural consequences, it must come right along with building them up, or else both will fail. So there are two sides to discipline, to training up a child in the way they should go. Right now we're talking about what it means to build them up. And here, I said, there is so much that is here, and you need to keep on learning more about this as you go, because we can't possibly cover it all today. But let me give you just a number of things. If you want to write these down, you can. Number one, very important for building up your children, is the example that you set. More important than anything you do with your children is who you are. Our mission here at Community of Hope Church is to help people grow in their relationship with God and with each other. Many people start coming to church because they want their children to grow. But the truth is that if we want our children to be growing and becoming who they were made to be, the very most important thing that we can do, the starting place, is to make sure that we are growing, changing and becoming more like the person that we were made to be. Because more is caught than is taught. Our children get more out of what they have seen in us than they will out of what we have said to them and what we have tried to train them to do. They will become, to a large extent, like the example that they have lived with and seen. Don't worry. God is gracious. Next, you got to give your children opportunities. As your children grow, they need to be helped to move into the next stage. No matter what stage your children are at, you should constantly be thinking about what is the thing that they're ready for next. You must not be holding them back, constantly saying they're not ready for that. There are some things you're going to need to say you're just not ready for. Now, you're going to have to wait until you're 10 years old before you can, handle a firearm. No, whatever it is. Drive a car when you're 16. But we should constantly be looking at where they are at and what they can handle now. It's a tendency as parents, for most parents, to be holding back because we still think of them as little. But we need to be constantly showing them what is the next responsibility that you can take on. You're 5 years old. You can probably do the dishes. You're 14 years old. We're at your grandparents' farm, and you ask me if you can drive the car down his private driveway, his dirt road. Yes, you can. We need to be constantly looking for those moments when we can let them push the envelope and get to the next stage. What? That was a hypothetical example. We need to be encouraging our children. The correction side does need to be there, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The consequences side. But most of what your children should be hearing out of your mouth should be words that build them up and encourage them. If it is not, you will damage your relationship with them long term, and the correction and consequence will not work in the long run. Do you hear me? Most of what your children hear from you must be encouragement, words that build them up. And in fact, here's where we need to be. There are these 4 letters, and there are a number of books that have used this, including the book Exponential by the Ferguson brothers. I love this book. It's a leadership principle, but it's also fantastic for thinking about your children. The letters I, C, N, and U. Those letters spell I see in you. You see it? I see in you. And this is an essential role for building up our children as parents. This is what we need to be doing, is paying attention to who they are. If you are paying attention, really listening to your children and listening to God at the same time, you will see who they are, who God made them to be in many ways, not completely, but in many ways you will see it long before they ever see it. And when you see it, you got to speak it into their life. When you see it in them, they don't know yet. Carter didn't know yet when he was that little that his legs were made to hike, and that was going to be something that he took on, literally took on his back as he got older, that it would help him probably in his future military career, that was part of who he was made to be. But I could see it, and I spoke it to him. That's one small example. We need to be doing that constantly, over and over again, speaking who they are into them. And to do that, we must be listening to them. We must be listening. That vision at the beginning, am I spending all my time working, toiling, not giving myself any sleep so I can achieve something? Or am I willing to pay the price to set things down so that I can listen to my children some of the time? You can't always listen to them. Okay, let's be real. Sometimes our kids just talk too much. I got one kid, we talked about him before, he just talks all the day long. So I'm not going to listen to him 24 hours a day, but I am going to take regular, consistent moments. Pay attention to what he's saying. Try to see what God is doing through him. We got to listen. 2 more ways that you can build your kids up that must be present in your parenting, not should be, must be. You got to give them affection. Kids need you to hug them, to touch them. Sometimes when they get too old, you got to do it in sneaky ways. Like if they're teenage boys, you have to beat them up sometimes, right? Just grab your kid and throw them on the ground, right? If they're teenage girls, maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the girl. Your kids need constant affection and closeness from you. They need time with you. And finally, in the subject of building up, we need to be having a lot of fun with our kids. That is essential. You got to go do things with them that are a lot of fun. Mess with them, whatever it takes. All right. Finally, let's move into the second half of building, of what it is to discipline our children, and that is consequence. Letting them feel natural consequences. So there are 2 sides here, right? Building them up must happen. It is essential. If it doesn't happen, the consequence side on its own will fail. But building them up on its own is not enough. Without the consequence side, building them up will also fail. We see this all through the Bible in the way that God relates to us, and we sang it earlier today. God, please bring your discipline into my life because I know what's in my heart, and I know it needs to change. Our constant role as parents is to be showing our kids in tangible ways, not just with words, but showing them what naturally happens when they make wrong choices. So, for example, one thing that I often have said to my kids, when they hit someone, when they hit their brother or their sister, they must experience a consequence for that. They say, why? It's not fair. I won't do it again. They must experience a consequence for that. And I help them see this. What will happen if that grows up? What will happen if that desire that you had to punch your brother, what will happen if you're still doing that when you're 25 years old? What would happen if I did that right now? If somebody at church, Pastor Philip, made me mad, and so I punched him in the chin, what would happen? Probably not much. He would just flinch a little bit, and then he'd pound me, right? And we would both end up in jail if it went far enough. You see, they must experience natural consequences on a smaller scale so that they know, not just with words, not just with ideas, but they feel what the results of those consequences will be when they grow up, when the consequences grow up. And they also must constantly be feeling not only negative consequences, but positive consequences as well. What will happen if I choose to do the hard work right now? Can I earn more time to play video games, Dad? Sure. You just got to do some hard work. What does that teach my child? It teaches my child that if they do hard work, they will be rewarded for it, and it builds it in deep. Well, I don't want to do the hard work. I just want to play the video game. Yeah, I know. So what? You have to do the hard work to get to the thing that you want. Finally, on this subject, there's so much here about how to discipline your kids. And if you're struggling with this, even if you're not, you need mentors and examples to help you do it better. Words are not enough to learn how to do this. But I will say this. In disciplining our children, anger and yelling doesn't work. Long-term, anger and yelling doesn't work. What works is natural consequences. Helping them to experience the results of the choice that they made. What's easy is to yell at them. They're in the back seat. They're doing, and we're always going to do this. Don't beat yourself up too much about it if you yell at your kids. You're not going to be perfect. But what's easy is to yell at them to get them to stop the behavior right now. But what that's going to teach them long term, all that does is put angry words into their minds and into their hearts. It does not teach them to deal with the realities of the world. It teaches them that you're mad at them and so they should fight against you. Is that what you want to teach your children? It's not what I want to teach my children. I don't want them to fight against me. I want them to fight against their own wrong choices. And so I'm not just saying if you yell at your kids, you get angry at them, you're bad. I'm saying you're ineffective. You're training them the wrong way when you do that. So, Pastor Isaac, stop doing it. I'll read one more scripture for you here that is based on, that is connected to this idea of training our children. And this is 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, and it's not even about parenting. It's about how a church should relate to people who haven't learned this as children, haven't learned the right ways to work, and just want everything for free. Here's what Paul says here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 7 to 10. You yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. You can see here that Paul was using this same principle even in the church. Well, shouldn't we just be nice to these people who don't have food? Certainly, if people don't have food, they need it. But if they are unwilling to work, they must experience the natural consequence of their choice to not work. That's what Paul is saying. Even for grown-ups, the church is trying to train people to be the people they were made to be. And so I would encourage you, on the consequence side of discipline, to put this verse into practice in your home. Not that you shouldn't feed your kids. If they don't work, don't actually starve them. Somebody might call somebody on you if you do that. But put the principle into practice. Your kids receive a lot from you, and they should be doing work in your home. Whatever work is appropriate for whatever age they are. They should be doing that. And see the connection between what they have to do, the hard things, and the results, the good things that come, or the negative things that come if they do not. Finally, we'll wrap up by just looking to God. Being a parent or leading another human being in any way is an impossible task. If you're with me, say amen. It is not a task that we can do on our own. God has given us all this wisdom, and we must work hard to put that wisdom into practice. We must take it very seriously, but in the end, it's not our wisdom or our strength that's going to make it happen. It's the grace and the power of God working through us. And so in the end, it's actually the fact that Jesus died on the cross for me that makes it possible that I could raise a human being. God could use me to raise a human being in a way that is effective and good. It's only because of His grace. I'm not good enough on my own to do it. And so as you sit there, if you're feeling all this wisdom that we've seen from the Bible today, if you're feeling overwhelmed or condemned by it all, remember the cross. Jesus Himself died for you because He knew that you could not do this or anything else with what is inside of you. And He has provided the power. And we must constantly support each other in prayer, lift each other up, lift our children up, and ask God for help as we walk through this. If we do, if we will commit and be the people who are willing to take up our cross and follow, and do the hard thing that He has placed in our life, we will see His power released into the world as our children do things that maybe we have never been able to do ourselves, go far beyond us in His grace. Let's pray, and we'll continue in worship.